In the world of singles magic cards, some deals are too good to pass up. A bear market brings out all the deals. Welcome back everyone, MTG Moxman here. Thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel today. You know, some deals are just so hard to pass up when they come along. And the prices we're seeing on the reserve list are a result of the economic climate around us. The fear of recession with people trying to get some liquidity into the market. But that also means so many reserve list cards have fallen in price. And there's still new products coming out that a lot of players have failed to recognize some of the deals that can be found. Finding cards at 50% on the reserve list is an amazing bargain any day of the week. But many players will look toward lower end reserve list cards. But what about the mid-level, the mid-tier cards? What are some of the deals you can find on these cards and what should you be looking for? That's what we're going to go through today. Let me show you some of these cards and examples of how great some of these prices can be depending on where you're looking. Let's get started. So our first card today is going to be Serra Sanctum Urza Saga. Now, this card has gone up since 2020. It rose a lot. I remember it being a $50 card, and yes, it's gone a lot higher since then. And this card is one of the ones trending down now, which means it's taken a longer time to fall. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Because this is one of the Urza's lands that is not banned. This can be played. And with all the new enchantments we've seen from the Theros block and Theros Beyond Death, as well as the new sets that come out, anything that has to do with enchantments can pump up a card like this. And when the enchantments nowadays can put tokens and creatures and things into play, it's even more important. So a white mana ramp can just be an insanely powerful card when used correctly with the right build around it. And it's not banned. Plus the artwork's amazing. So we take a look at the card and you say, okay, add 1 white to your mana pool for each enchantment you control. Now, of course, back in the day, white was a very predominant type of enchantment type building style because white had a lot of enchantments like Circle of Protections. But the game has gone so far beyond that mold that a card like this is getting close to being broken, depending on what you're trying to use it for. The market price says $287.85. That's the market price for a near mint. But if you're looking for moderately played, which a lot of commanders do, moderate, even heavily played, they just want a real card. They don't want a proxy. They want the real deal. So when you look at this, that's when it gets kind of crazy because you can find this card for under 200 if you know where to look, guys. You can check TCG Player. You can check Facebook groups, your local LGS. You can trade in cards. There are ways of getting around it. I mean, it's €200. You can get it over there too and get it shipped over. I don't care. This card has value. It has potential growth later on, and with the price now below the $400 mark and kind of drifting down, even if you're not going to buy it now, keep a close eye on this card and see where it leads you in the near future. Now our next card is Land Equilibrium, another card that has been as high as $700 to $800, okay? And it was hanging for around a year at the $500 mark and selling, buying and selling at that level. And now it continues to fall. So we have to look at this card and say, what's the viability? What's the versatility? Look at the card and say to yourself, it's 2 blue plus 2 generic. If your opponent controls at least as much land as you do, he or she must sacrifice her land for each land he or she puts into play. So that means unless you put a land into play, guys, it's horrible. You're neutering out how much land they can have. You are controlling the mana base of the game. They have to keep sacking land when they put it in. I'm sure they can put it in and tap it, but they got to sack it as soon as it comes into play. This hinders the ability of another opponent to use it. Now, cards like this actually don't see that much play nowadays. Not as much as they used to. But look at all the ways that green can ramp in land now. Look at the cards that go into graveyards to put lands into play, and you realize this is not a bad option. And again, 244 is for a near mint card. You can go for the heavily played and pay the 180, 170 US mark to get this card. You can look on TCG Player and you can say, hey, good price, good deal. Maybe you have some trade in bulk at a local store you're going to trade in and buy it directly from your LGS. It's an amazing deal, guys. It's something to consider because cards like this, when you know they've been that high and you kind of ignore it saying, I can never afford that card, maybe you can. And after you own one, it's always going to have a certain profit level for trading, for buying, for selling. It'll have a little more liquidity than other cards of a lower reserve list tier. It's just something to focus on. Now, Eureka. I know, not just the idea, but E equals MC squared. I've used this card forever. And this is one of those cards that hit that like $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 mark. Forget the spike you see on the screen. That's like a BGS 10, black label thing. Ignore that stuff, guys. This card was kind of hovering around the $1,200 to $1,400 mark for quite a while. And it's not there now because the market has shifted. Things have changed. Prices have fallen down, but it's still an extremely powerful card if used correctly. So I want you to look at this card. It is 2 green and 2 generic, and it says both players, obviously it's been errated for like commander or something, but both players may take any permanents in his or her hand and put them directly into play. Players take turns putting one card from their hand into play, and they take turns going back and forth, going around the circle, however, until you've played all your cards. But what happens if your opponent has no cards? What happens if you made sure they shed their hands? And now I've used this in a super friend, an early Planeswalker deck back in 2012, 2014. I use this in a Super Friends deck where I just pile on Planeswalkers and basically overwhelm the opponent in one turn. It's a lot of fun, okay? But this card is, that's when that card was a $50 card. It has gone up so much now that when you see it at this price level, you say, is it going to fall further? In this bear market, is it going to go a little bit further down? If you're asking me, the Moxman, I'm going to say yes. This card is going to settle sub 500. And that will make it a lot more attainable for players, but it also will start drawing more attention to the card. Other players may have more of a desire to get this card when they see that happening. So don't forget that. It's one of those things you do have to pay attention to, is after you've seen it, other players might too. So you got to make sure you're in a position that when you're ready to buy, you just buy it. Because if it gets swooped up in some kind of mini buy, if it keeps falling, bigger fish out there do pay attention to this stuff and say, what's the damage? Well, how much will I lose versus how much I can gain? They will do a risk analysis. Now, our next card is the Abyss. Now, this card, guys, is, of course, it's one of the cards everyone wants. So this card has been as high as $3,000. The market right now says $810. That's for near mint, but you know what? I haven't seen it that cheap personally yet, okay? I've seen it for around the $1,200 to $1,400 Canadian, a little bit higher. But you can find moderately played copies for below this price. Here in Canada, you can find a moderately played or heavily played, I think, for around 800 Canadian, which would be, what, 600 US? That's getting to a very, very good level for players who want to get this card. With the cost of some of the newer cards coming out nowadays, if you get a couple lucky packs, you have a lot of trade-in value that can lead to cards like this. Cards that will never be reprinted and be protected and also have great playability. 1 black, 3 generic. All players bury 1 target non-artifact creature under their control if they have any during their upkeep. Non-artifact. Think about all these new crazy artifacts we have out there. Non-artifact. It's such an amazing card. And it hasn't been this cheap in so long. I mean, before 2021, this card was still like a $500, $600 card. So this one has long history of being a more expensive card. It's one of the best cards in Legends. And of course, it's on the reserve list, so it's amazing. It has great playability in future builds of anti-creature decks or artifact-heavy creature decks. This is just something that can't be ignored at that price level. And if you're using TCG Player or something, guys, if you decide to buy any of these cards on the list, please don't forget to use my affiliate link found in the description of all my videos. If you just click that link, it takes you right to TCG Player for your shopping experience. I really appreciate everyone who helps me out by using my link. Thanks again, guys. Now, Nether Void, another one. Look, market price, $1,000. You can find this a lot lower than that if you're looking for heavily played, if you just want a real copy. Now, Nether Void is 1 black, 3 generic. All spells are countered unless their casters pay an additional 3. This just slows down the game for everyone. But if you're a player who's built a deck around this, you will have ways of cheating cards onto the field of battle. You will have ways of messing people up. These are just cards you're like, yeah, I can. When you look at these cards and you look at them from Legends, in the future of this card, in the next 10, 15 years, is it going to stay this low? Is it going to be this obtainable? I would argue it's never going to be. I mean, right now I think it's actually going to trend downward still, just like some of the other cards. I think we're going to go sub 1,000. It'll probably even go somewhere around the $900 mark if you watch it long enough. But there have been some sales now at this level. Players are paying attention to it, and those who are seeking it out are already buying copies. Now our next card, Mirror Universe. This is an interesting one that most players never really thought about before 2021. It was a cheaper card, 50, 60 bucks. It reached around the like $700, $650 mark. And I'll be honest, this one's going to continue to trend down. It's a fringe card, kind of janky, doesn't have as much playability as other cards, but it does have a fun effect that players like to use, and that's switching life totals. So if you're one of those decks that's going to keep you alive and you're like negative 500 life and you switch with an opponent, it's kind of funny to watch them just die instantly and lose everything to Mirror Universe, and then you can always, bring Mirror Universe back. There's lots of ways of getting this card back, remember that. But you look at this card, and players say, hey, it's kind of fun. I always love the artwork. I did use this a couple times when I was a teenager. Not to as great effect as some of my friends did, but it's a card to watch, to see where it goes. And this card definitely will trend down. And it is a card people should be paying attention to because it is used by collectors. People do like to buy this card and have it around for some fun, janky cards. But this card doesn't deserve to be at this price point right now. The market, the bear market, won't bear this price. The sales are down and it's still dropping, so just keep an eye on it. This market value should drop to around 300, if not a little bit below. So just keep an eye on it for the next year, off and on. Keep tabs on it. You'll see what I mean. Now, Natural Selection. This is one of my all-time favorite cards. I love the artwork. Always have, always will. And you look at this card and you say, should it have been 500 bucks? No, I actually don't believe this card should be. As much as I love it, I think this card should be around the $250 mark. It isn't as played as other cards. It does have a nice little effect. It's an instant card, 1 green. And of course, look at the top 3 cards of any player's library. You may opt to rearrange those cards or shuffle their library. So I used to use this card with things like Isochron Scepter. It was a lot of fun to just mess around with it with my opponent's deck. But in a commander game, you can help rearrange in two-headed giant commander. You can go ahead in commander and start rearranging people's decks and making sure they get the right card or don't get the right card when used in conjunction with other cards around it. This price point, it's going to still fall. Okay, I don't think it's going to hold here. There are some players holding some heavy bags on this card. I think we're going to see it fall below this price to around the market value 129. I can see it going sub 100. It's going to take a while to get there. There'll be resistance at that level, but it's going to happen. Now, our next card is going to be Wheel of Fortune. Very interesting, guys. Wheel of Fortune has been continuing to fall ever since the buyout happened, and late into 2021, it just started shifting downward. Now, there is a Judge promo of this card, which never, foil, but never should have been printed. It's out there too, don't forget, and it holds a much higher price tag. But this is the revised edition because it's the cheapest edition you can get. If you want this card at near mint, you see it says $293. Here in Canada, you can find this card for around $230 to $240 Canadian, heavily played. Near mint still going to run you around $400 Canadian, but I don't think it's going to hold at this price point. I've been watching the sales, watching the listings, and it continually is shifting downward by $5-6 as people tend to undercut each other. So that's something you need to just be aware of if it's a card you want. I don't think you have to buy this one yet. I think there's people out there who grabbed dozens of copies on its way up, and now they're looking for that liquidity, and they're not going to quite get it yet. So it's just one of those cards, as amazing as it is, I think it's going to fall further. But later on in its life, I can see this card having a much higher price tag attached to it. Cyclopean Tomb is one of my favorite kind of all-time kicker cards from back in the day. This market price, again, is not going to hold. When you look at this card, it's so kind of bland by today's standards. 4 casting cost generic artifact, so it can fit in any deck. It's mono, which means you can only use it once per turn, and you can turn a land into a swamp. And then if the Cyclopean Tomb's gone, you remove one of those counters once per turn of your choice. You can still mess up people's lands for a while. This card is fun, but it doesn't have a high price tag, and the artwork's epic, but the high price tag's not there because it doesn't really fit into a lot of modern day decks. It doesn't fit into a lot of commander decks at all, although I do play with this card in some commander decks for fun, just to throw people off and get rid of some of those pesky, legendary lands I don't like. It doesn't have that high price tag, and it shouldn't right now in this market, so it's going to fall. I would say this card's going to hit that $150 market value, so you can keep an eye out for it if it's a card you're after. And don't forget as well, guys, some of these cards will be even cheaper in Collector Edition. Now, our last card, Thawing Glaciers. I keep mentioning this card because as this price falls, this is one of those cards that should be a lot higher. I don't know why it's this cheap. Any landfall deck loves to have it. It does have a Judge promo, and it's an amazing card to use. So it comes into play tapped, but there's ways of untapping it. Right? There's so many cards that can untap things now. Search your library for a basic land card, put it into play tapped. This doesn't count towards your once per land ability, right? So you just, you can play with a basic land, and then you can put this land out. Like, guys, you talk about thinning your deck out. I love this card, and the fact you can find it for like $17 is amazing. And that's what I'm talking about with some of these deals. Not every card is going to be, dirt cheap, but some of these cards are dirt cheap compared to where they have been and where the history of some of these cards have been for us to see. So the value will be there later on as long as the market recovers in an appropriate way and the bearish becomes the bull. Remember that. A bull market, people are buying, and spending on these kind of assets, whereas the bear market, we're like, hey, we're waiting for these deals, waiting for prices to drop. And that's still where we are. Make no mistake about it, this is still bear market, recession hanging over our heads. These prices are going to fall. Not everyone can hold on to these cards, and some people have so many copies that they can afford to let them go to cheaper price, and it really doesn't affect their margins at all other than the profitability of the overall card. They can say, I was hoping to make $1,500, I'm only going to make $900. I don't care, I need some cash right now for a vacation, whatever it may be. Life choices. So it's interesting. Anyway, just cards I wanted to share with everyone. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me on the channel today. Looking forward to seeing these comments in the comment section, and I'll talk to you guys soon, okay? Have a great day. We'll see you for tomorrow's video. Thanks again. This is that moment in time at the end of the videos where I get to say thank you to all the fantastic patrons on this channel who support me each and every day. Thanks again, everyone out there. Patrons, you guys are amazing. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. You want to put the Bizarre Baghdad on hold to buy an Abyss. It's crazy, some of these prices. It's so good. It's tempting. It's tempting. Yeah. Let's put Abyss in the comment section. Abyss.